Hi folks, hope all is well. Fabio here, Insight Manager at Beatfreaks. Welcome to this short insight video on the question, what will a future leader be like? This is based on qualitative data we got from 2,000 Gen Zs, 16 to 25-year-olds, spread right across the UK. All of them answered this question, what will a future leader be like, in open format. They wrote in whatever they wanted to write. And essentially, this is all about what they said. The future at the moment is currently, I suppose, occupying a little bit of a weird place. It's coming out of lockdown. It's a really, really paradoxical mix of this idea of returning to something which we know, which we're familiar with, but to something new, to something that has changed about society because of the way that the pandemic has had an impact on the way we live our lives. So it's sort of this paradoxical idea of returning to something, but coming to something new, coming to something which we haven't experienced before. The bottom line is, at the moment, we've been given such an opportunity to positively impact and positively shape the way that society is because of the pandemic, because of everything which has happened as a result. Now can really, really be a time to pause, to think about, okay, this is often the way that society is and the way that society sort of happens and is run. These are ways in which we can change, or things that we aren't happy with, or things that we want to look at in sort of detail. When we did our Take the Temperature report last year at sort of the height of lockdown, we spoke to young people exactly about this, and 98% of them, an overwhelming majority, said that now the pandemic could be a moment to make a positive change in society, to really, really have a positive impact on the world and sort of the way that we do things. So one thing that might help us look about how we can install that change, how we can make it happen, is to think about what leadership looks like. We naturally believe our leaders should sort of embody how we want the world to look, how we want the world to feel. You generally invest in leaders who stand for values which you think are important, or who sort of stand for stuff that you're really, really passionate about, or issues that you really, really care about. And in that respect, the future and leadership are inextricably linked, because you put your desires for the future in the leadership which you aspire to, who you want to be in charge, who you want to look up to. So this question, I think, is really, really pertinent for establishing, if now is a moment for a positive change, and if now is a way to shape the future, then leadership is a really, really exciting way we can do that, and a way which we can sort of explore what we want society to look like. So this is essentially a document which you can download just below this video on the webpage. There's plenty of data in here. So today we're probably only going to chat about a very, very small portion of it. We've picked out a few key trends and a few key things which we've noticed from it, but please, please, please go read, have a look. This is how loads of young people that we spoke to answered and sort of what they thought. Essentially, people fell into two principal camps, I suppose. The people who answered how they expected leaders to look in the future, how they expected leaders to be in the future, and how they wanted leaders to look and to be in the future. As you can imagine, I'm sure the mixing approach was from sort of frustration, cynicism, pessimism on one end, to complete desire and inspiration for change on the other. So those people who answered what they expected leaders to look like were generally relatively pessimistic in their approach, and took an idea that, leadership has not changed. It is the same people who are always in charge, and we will see, generally speaking, if it is the same people in charge, then that's usually associated with a certain demographic of person. We see in responses from across the board, the same as always, we see here, the same as the last leaders, another, the pattern. This idea of repetition, and then further than that, the repetition, who is it that is in charge? Generally university educated, white, older men, wealthy, privileged, white male, cis white, straight male, elite, white man, exactly that. The people that we see in charge are often the same people who are leading the country, the same people who are doing sort of the forward-thinking positions within society. Those people are often looking the same, and what is drawn up here is, this is an issue. This is something that we are not happy with. And the people who are sitting on that perhaps more frustrated or more cynicism side of answering this question think that perhaps in our future leaders, it doesn't look like it's going to change soon. Completely on the other side of the coin, there were plenty of people who were super inspired and hopeful about what the potential for a future leader to look like, which is super, super exciting. We pulled out sort of three principal things which came about what this ideal approach would be, what people want their future leaders to look like. The first of which is something which goes sort of across a lot of research which we've done and which we've thought about, and is this idea of authenticity as something we value, something we think are really, really important. It comes up in several places in this piece of research. You hear genuine, genuine, genuine. Authenticity, being genuine, being a person who you can relate to as exactly that, as a person on a human level, being true to yourself, is something that people really, really value in their leaders and think is really, really important. And this is right the way through to what we see in this response here, which is that it's written, admit if they don't know and or need support and guidance / have made a mistake. If you're authentic and you hold that you don't know something and you're just honest and true as a person, that's something we really, really value in a leader. Something we mentioned in the Institutions of the Future report of, when a brand has got something wrong, it's much more authentic, it's much more real. It goes down much better when you hold your hands up and say, this is what we did wrong, this is how we're going to change it in the future. The same applies for our leaders. Authenticity, being genuine, being open to mistakes and admitting to them and being human about it is something that people really, really value and really, really think is important. So that was point number one, genuine and authentic. Point number two is this idea of empathy, of compassion. If all of our leaders have been the same, and it is going to continue in that vein, then one way in which we can change that or adopt a new approach is to really, really value empathy and compassion in the world, to try and put ourselves in other people's shoes, essentially. Understand people who have different experiences to yourself, or listen to them, or better act upon their needs as opposed to your own desires as a leader. So we can see this is probably one of the most commonly used words in this data set was empathy. It comes up so often. Empathy, compassion, we see here, empathy again, compassion, representative, down the bottom here there's loads, empathy, understanding, representative of society, understands the network of society, understanding of all political viewpoints. Is this idea that you have to be able to understand how other people think about the world to be a good leader. You have to put themselves in their shoes and not just value your own ideals or things that are going to further your own sort of personal incentives or personal desires. Empathy and compassion. And then finally, again, something which sort of spans across the first two and I think is the ideal that a lot of young people are looking towards, is a more representative leadership force. It's something that Time and Time Again report, which we published, goes into so much depth about. And it goes to really, really the core of I think, what representation is all about, essentially. So we have, throughout answers here, people calling out specific groups which they want to see better represented in leadership. So people of color is one which comes up time and time again. People in the LGBTQ plus community, people of non-gender confirmation, so people who are non-binary or are not cisgendered perhaps, Black, female, brown, female, which comes down here, women and people of color, and the intersectionalities between all of those things are really, really important in seeing in our leadership force. And frankly, according to this data set, it's not something which is seen enough. It's something, again, like I said, which we deal with in the Time and Time Again report and talk about in a lot more depth than we do here or have time to do here. But representation in leadership is something which young people seem to place at the absolute foremost of importance. Yes, be empathetic towards others. Yes, be genuine. But above all, we need a leadership which is not just representative of one group within society, or is not just the same repeated over and over and over again, but is one which actually represents a range of viewpoints, actually embodies the population as a whole, as opposed to sort of one part of that population or one idea within it. This idea of representation is super important, and I think is really, really interesting when discussing this question of what do you want a future leader to look like? Because again, when talking to young people about representation, about how we can further its aims, time and time again, we heard that, representation just in media or in advertising or in front of a camera does not go far enough. It does not achieve it does not achieve sort of greater cultural awareness and a more tolerant attitude towards other people within society. What does? Inclusive leadership, representation in leadership, representation in decision making. And what we can overwhelmingly see in this data set is that young people are really, really passionate about having that in our leadership. Thanks so much, and hopefully see you again soon on another Insight video. Thanks.